Hi, and welcome to In the World, a monthly discussion of current topics and how they relate and how we relate to them as Christians. I'm John Kreiner. I've been attending Trinity for about six and a half years. Very active in the ministries here, music as well as the youth ministry, and excited to really talk about topics that not only are important to the world, but also important to us as Christians and how we react. Greg?
And I'm Greg Derwart. Nice to see everybody. Thanks for joining us. I've been here at Trinity for about 8 years now, and blessed to be able to take advantage of all that happens here in this wonderful ministry. We play music together. We're in the Passion Play together. So happy to bring this forum to you. These were some ideas that came out of the previous videos that started last year. These current events sections used to be a particular part of Trinity Talk Live, and for various reasons, it was appropriate to pull that out of Trinity Talk Live, and but there was still a value and demand for teeing up these conversations. So here we are. We're going to do this on a monthly basis. The second Wednesday of each month. So this is the first time we're teeing this up, and John and I will be a part of the discussion. We may have others join us as well in the future, but happy to be starting off with some current events that have been going on the past week or so. So you may or may not have heard about these topics, but we're going to review them with you and just talk about them for about 4 minutes at a time. Our friendly director will keep an eye on the clock, and we'll keep things moving along. So are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right, story number one. On Monday, September 3rd, Nike, a leading manufacturer of sports shoes and apparel, unveiled a new advertisement as part of a campaign celebrating the 30th anniversary of their slogan, Just Do It. This particular ad featured a black and white portrait of former San Francisco 49er quarterback Colin Kaepernick, along with the tagline, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. Kaepernick started making headlines during the 2016 preseason when he began kneeling rather than standing during the national anthem at NFL football games as a protest against racial inequality in the United States. Many people have supported him and his actions, whereas others find them to be disrespectful towards service members and first responders. In response to the move by Nike, many of those who disagree with Kaepernick have called for a boycott of Nike products, some going as far as to burn and destroy any Nike merchandise which they already owned. So interesting story, and obviously the Colin Kaepernick story has been playing out for a couple years now. I think that in terms of Nike's ad campaign, personal opinion, I think that the social aspect of organizations has almost become more important than the stockholders and profits. And not that shouldn't be the number one goal, but in some regards, they're always trying to make a statement through their product and their advertisements. Whether you agree with what Colin Kaepernick did or not, I don't know that I would go out and burn my gear. Number one, it's expensive. Number two, I don't think that does anything. And to kind of tee the conversation off, when I saw the tagline, the first thing that came to mind was us as Christians. The tagline, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, we really need to look inside and understand what does that mean to us as Christians moving forward. And again, whether you agree with Colin Kaepernick or not, it is a good discussion to have, and we should have it civilly and not call people names and stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, like you said, this started a couple years ago, and it wasn't necessarily the NFL taking a stand. It was individual employees of the NFL
Right.
and of these franchises making I shouldn't take a stand. I shouldn't say take a stand. They were taking a knee, and trying to make a statement. I disagree with the way they were doing it. I think there's there's a better way to do that. But in terms of Christians and whether or not we should boycott companies, brands, products, because they may or may not be Christian friendly or correlate with our core values. I looked up a verse. I was trying to get some insight from the Word, and I saw a verse from Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 9 and 10, where he's talking about, initially he says, that we should avoid people that are sinful in nature. But then, in the next verse, he turns around and says that it's impossible to do that completely. Otherwise, we'd have to completely remove ourselves from the world, and we can't do that.
Right.
So, rather than proactively boycotting something, I think the better way to approach this from a Christian perspective is, from the glass half full standpoint, be the light and show the example of what we should be doing, as opposed to pointing fingers at what we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, and if you take a look at this in comparison to, the Baker story and the right of an organization, a company to have an opinion, and even go to Dan Cathy from
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A, right? It can work both ways,
Yeah.
right? And I think if you step back from a Christian perspective, we are supposed to shine the light of Christ, and we can't do that if we're being nasty, right? So it's one thing to boycott, it's one thing to not purchase a product, but it's another thing to call names and to do stuff that's destructive, that isn't necessarily productive.
Yeah. So, all right, we ready for story number 2?
Let's go to story number 2.
Okay. So this one says on August 29th, Judge Christopher C. Connor of the United States District Court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania ruled in favor of a group of atheists who wanted to deliver invocations at sessions of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. The House had a policy allowing for invocations to be delivered by either members of the House or guest chaplains. However, in order for guests to appear, they must be ordained clergy. Now, because the group of atheists were not, quote-unquote, ordained, they were not permitted to deliver the invocation. They, along with groups such as Americans United for Separation of Church and State and American Atheists, filed suit against the House. The court decided that the House policy violated the Establishment Clause of the United States Constitution, since it favored religion over non-religion, and ordered that the policy be changed to permit non-religious invocations. So, I have a problem with many parts of this story. And so let's start with some definitions. Atheism, let's start with a definition of what is atheism. And I would at its core would say that is someone or a group that does not believe in God, or says that God does not exist.
Or a greater power, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's put that on the side. Next, I looked up the definition of invocation.
As did I.
Okay. So what does it mean to have an invocation? It means it's the action of invoking something or someone.
Right.
Okay. So in our,
It's God.
So for us, we're invoking the name of God or the presence of God. And then let's look at the Establishment Clause,
Right.
and this is when we're talking about the First Amendment of the Constitution, and how it states that there shall be no establishment of religion, of a particular religion, nor shall there be no discrimination of a particular religion.
True.
So, all right. So how can someone who is atheist invoke? Who are they, or what are they invoking? So if they want to provide an invocation or a prayer what do they have to invoke?
My thoughts exactly. I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
So the whole thing seems ridiculous to me, and then as I've said in other forums, the Establishment Clause has been co-opted by this myth of separation of church and state, which has, that language is not in the Constitution or the First Amendment. It came from a letter that was written by President Jefferson to a Baptist church in Connecticut that was talking, that the church was worried about whether or not the state was going to create a state denomination, and the president was basically telling them not to worry about that. Right. So, folks that don't want religion in this country for whatever reasons just seem to use that and expand it in the wrong way.
Yeah, similarly, I think I had the same feelings with this as, I looked up invocation because I'm like, okay, what am I missing something? Because, but it is truly invoking a greater power to be with you, to sit through the meetings, and in no way does that establish any formal religion in those meetings or in the assembly. Right. So to me, I don't see where the issue was with the atheists. I mean, I could see if they wanted to say, well, let's not have any invocations because we don't want to do this, and that's almost a more realistic request. But to say that we want to be able to do an invocation, well, what are they going to invoke? It doesn't make any sense. So and I think that's where you're right. People have taken we're not going to establish a state religion or a federal religion, and we're not going to impose others that you can't practice your religion, which I think that even both sides get a little bit misconstrued on that, because we are allowed to practice whatever religion we feel
in the public square.
In the public square, absolutely. So and I think you're right. People they've used that and they've co-opted that establishment clause for their own purposes.
Right. All right. Are we ready for story number 3?
All right. Story number 3. On August 26th, City Road Chapel in Madison, Tennessee, hosted the first Beautiful Day Neighborhood Festival, a community-wide block party. The event was designed to honor the themes of Fred Rogers, himself a Presbyterian minister, and his classic children's television program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Reverend J. Voorhees, lead pastor of City Road Chapel, told the Christian Post, "Our church takes seriously Christ's call to love our neighbors, but we recognize in our current climate neighborliness is a lost art." Hundreds of people attended the 3-hour event, which included the Beautiful Day Band, who opened with the iconic theme song from the long-running show. They also prominently displayed on stage a red cardigan like that worn by Mr. Rogers himself. Pastor Voorhees explained that their church is in an area with high poverty, homelessness, and youth violence. But they felt it was important to serve their community. Voorhees explained, "More often than not, it seems like church folks think that we get to choose who our neighbors are rather than loving the actual neighbors we have." What a great story. I enjoyed Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Sure.
Growing up, and my wife and my family and I moved into a neighborhood, very integrated, segregated. It's a military area, and what we really like about the area is that the neighbors care for each other, right? And I think, as this pointed out, I think it is a lost art. We've almost become, we don't want to interfere with someone else's life or feel like we're overbearing. And I'm sure, Greg, when you were growing up, if you did something wrong at your neighbor's house 2 blocks away, by the time you got home, Mom knew about it,
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that we've lost that, and I think that this is a great way, not just as a church to get out and fellowship with each other, but to really serve out in the community. I did a similar thing up in Delaware with a friend of mine's church, and we wanted to invite the community in to this fair, which allowed them to just feel the love of God. It's not pushing a church, it's not pushing religion, but it's just showing that love of God. And we can only plant seeds, and we never know when we plant a seed that we actually planted it. But the only way we can plant seeds is if we act the way Christ wants us to.
Sure.
So this is a great initiative, and kudos and cheers for them.
Yeah. I thought it was a great story as well. That the hymn says they will know we are Christians by our love.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is a great example of that. Two things come to mind. Loving your neighbor just expands to the whole concept of civility.
Yeah.
And obviously that is something that is waning away in our society today. So any time a church or a group can create an opportunity to build civility and fellowship in the community is fantastic. The other thing that came to mind is just how we have become so isolated in our homes. We knew everyone on our block growing up, and it's a lot more difficult for that to happen. I don't know if that's because of technology or what else it might be, but we just seem to be so much more isolated, and we rely on technology to communicate with each other instead of sitting out on the front porch, going to some civic association meeting or whatever. So
and it's interesting because our society has become an us versus them society, whether it's Democrat versus Republican, whether it's Steelers fans versus Ravens fans, whether it's whatever, right? Everybody, instead of celebrating what we all have in common, which is we are children of God, right? And if we looked at every single person like that, you go to a football game and you see people throwing stuff at each other because they're from the other team, and then at the end of the game you look down at the players and what are they doing? There's a bunch of them circled praying after the game, and you see a guy like Ray Lewis and even Carson Wentz is I think the new Ray Lewis, right? Where really putting his faith out there in front of everybody to see, and I think that this is another one of those stories where it's just showing the love, and when you're famous you can talk a little bit more, but when you're not famous it's more about your actions and how you treat other people.
Absolutely. Very good. So that does it for our first episode.
I wish we had more time.
I think we did a good job, though. So well done.
Yeah, same to you.
Thanks for joining us, and make sure to tune in. Like I said, the first or second Wednesday. Second Wednesday of every month. So we'll be back again in October. So that's it for now. Have a great day. God bless.
See ya. God bless.